Sharon works with athletes, Olympians, all around managing their nutrition, and most particularly I think today we're going to talk about the menstrual cycle and the effects on performance. Would I be right?
Yeah,
great.
That's right.
Sharon Madigan, ladies and gents.
What I'm looking to try and do today is first off start with how nutrition maybe has a bit of an impact, and then we'll bring it into how it's related to your menstrual cycle. So from a point of view of nutrition in sport and performance, what I'm looking at, the focus is keeping you as athletes well. That's really important for us, because if you're not well or if you're sick, you can't actually train, and if you can't train, then you can't compete. So that's really important. So we want to reduce your risk of injury. We want to make sure that you don't get tired and fatigued, and obviously we want to keep a strong immunity and keep you well. We want you to be able to fuel to train and to recover, to enhance recovery, and to be able to do that every single day of the week that you train as well. And if you do get sick or you do get injured, we want you to get better as quickly as possible. And then if we look at that bit, which is probably the bit that you're keen on, or the coaches are certainly keen on, if you look at the research, people that win Olympic Games medals, the ones that win it have lost less days to sickness and injury and those types of things. So those people that can train the most tend to win the most medals. And that's really crucial from my point of view. We want you to be able to adapt to your training as much as possible, and we want you to get back to training as quickly as possible if you get sick or injured. So this is obviously what you want in terms of this performance here. You don't want to be sick or injured. We want your training to be good, and we want your competition to certainly be good as well. So why do you think that it might be a bit of a tightrope, whoops-a-daisy, and we might find training and fueling quite difficult? I think this is one of the difficulties. We're getting driven in certain ways about how we should look, or what the idealized view of an athlete is, but in real terms, we're all very, very different. And every sport's different as well. So what you're looking to try and achieve in terms of the physicality of it should be very different depending on you as an individual, number one, okay? And that's you. And then number two, what are the demands of your sport? Not the demands of who you're with in class or who your other teammates are or who your friends are. Number one, it should be you. What is your body shape? And then how you can adapt that to be the best at your particular sport as well. And you have to keep that very much at the front of your mind, because you'll be driven in all sorts of directions about what that looks like. And it's a real maze of stuff, so you might not be able to see that one. Anybody ever heard this one? Eating at night makes you fat. Yeah? So if you train late at night, do you think it's a good idea that you don't eat after that? No, but that message is still coming through here. What else have we got? Protein supplements are key for muscle building. Anybody heard that one? Yeah? And people think that. If you're not eating enough to do the training that you're trying to do, no amount of protein supplements is going to make any difference whatsoever when it comes to building muscle. What's that one? Carbs make you fat. Anybody heard that one? Oh yeah, carbs are evil. Sugar is evil. Absolutely. Most of it, at some point or other, may consume too much of it, but there is a time and a place. And what I found is that if you say that one thing is good or bad, it actually doesn't do you any great favors in the long term. So you're better off not giving titles to food like that, I think. Natural is safe. Everything's sold, this is natural, okay? Cocaine is natural. I'm not actually going to say that you should take it. It's also gluten-free, and that's another one, but we won't go there either. Oh yeah. It says on Insta, I shouldn't eat this because it's not clean. Anybody ever heard that kind of stuff? Yeah? I hate that word, clean, dirty. It's not good. That's only for bath time. So, why? Social media is driving an awful lot about lifestyle and the body beautiful. If we look back at that picture about what an athlete or an individual looks like, it has to fit you first off, not what it says on Instagram. Instagram is not my go-to place for information around nutrition, and it shouldn't be yours. Celebrities shouldn't be the people that's driving the information that you have as well. Fads and quick fixes. If we want an answer to something, we generally want it tomorrow or the next day, but some of these things require us to put in a little bit more effort and work and actually change behaviors, which kind of takes a wee bit of time as well. This idea about what's going to be a winning weight comes back to a lot of the things, and it's actually part of the reason why athletes find balance in that tightrope of fueling and performance quite difficult, because it comes back to potentially people thinking, oh, if I eat too much, my weight might not be right. And I can guarantee you that actually that's not the place to go if you're training. So that's really, really important as well. Racing weight or competition weight, which isn't healthy for the long term, and it's about seeing and making sure that we've actually got something that's fit for purpose as well. And coaches and others who have significant influence telling you the wrong thing. And I know that's very, very tricky to navigate and negotiate, but you've got to really make sure that you're aware that that can happen. So be careful with that as well. And for me, this is really the crux of a lot of the problems that I see, and a lot of why I see a lot of females that have not had periods for a couple of years. It's a big struggle for them. They know there's something not right, but they're not sure what it is. So, and it comes back to this here. Calories are king. But what happens is, if people are trying to change their weight or change their body composition, the go-to place is you eat less. Would people think that? Yeah, and that's not the case, because for me, it's about being able to train consistently, and that's where you get changes in your body composition, not actually by starving yourself. So it's very, very difficult to balance that. So this is my attempted art, which wasn't very good, but anyway, let's go. So I want to go through a couple of things with you just to show you. So this is our fuel tank, okay? This is our training, general health, bone health, immunity, growth for you goes back here, hormones, bloods. We've got all these things that are going on under the level of the skin, okay? And you assume that they're going on, don't you? You hope they are. So you get up every morning, you think, yeah, everything's working, let's go, okay? So can anybody, if I was to pick any of these tanks here, so this is our fuel tank, do you think that the fuel fills any one of these preferentially 1, 2, or 3, or do you think they're all about the same? Okay, anybody shout out what they think might be more important? General health, number 1. Anybody, any other ideas? Okay, this is number 1, training. Okay, and it's kind of an evolutionary thing. If there's a big lion here and he's going to eat you, doesn't matter that the rest of them, because if you're dead, doesn't matter. Okay, so it's very much an evolutionary thing. But what you're actually hoping is that there's enough for all of these things that go on there. Okay, so what happens if training goes up and you still keep the fuel tank the same? Any ideas about what might happen there? Yeah, so then we get a situation where some of these things might have to be directed into that tank of training. Okay, so some people might say, but sure, that doesn't really happen to me. But if you're only doing that once a week, every single week of the year, then that's where we start to get imbalances. And for me, it's not only days of the week, but it's also periods of time. So for example, if you train, let's say on a Friday night at 7 o'clock or 6:30 to 8:30, and then you train again on a Saturday morning from 9 o'clock to 11, could that ever happen? Yeah, that's 2 training sessions in less than 12 hours. Have you considered that that is actually that situation there? Have you increased what you eat around that particular period of time? Have you changed the way you eat? No, a lot of people don't. So it's by looking at your week and seeing where are the pressure points that could happen, because over the longer period of time and when training load goes up, then that's what changes things then as well. That's the end of my art. So, a lot of reason why people restrict calories is because they want to try and either change their shape or possibly lose weight. And remember, some people are trying to lose weight that shouldn't be doing that in the first place. And remember as well, if you train really hard and if you don't eat well enough, it can actually result in you not losing any weight because the body actually shuts down a bit. So it goes into, it loses the ability to work optimally. And what I've seen is where I've actually possibly doubled the calorie intake of some athletes. So I've got an athlete that I can think of at the moment where her calorie intake increased from 3,000 calories a day to 6,500 calories a day. Does anybody know what that looks like? It's a lot. And her body shape completely changed because guess what? She had a better consistency in training. She was able to increase her training and she didn't get sick, which was the problem we had with her all along. So that's really important. And why is it, and we're coming now to the crux of the problems, what happens if you're in energy mismatch? This is really important for you guys. So if you're not getting enough here, this can have an effect on our bones, which is really important, which is probably coming from some of our hormones because it has a direct link on our bone health. And remember, you see those tanks we were talking about there, where the fuel goes to? Hormones is a big part of that. So they need a little bit of fuel as well. You need to put something into that. But if there's not enough going in, it won't get anything. And everybody's very different because it goes in different places. Our body actually starts to get slower. So I had a coach tell me a couple of weeks, actually last week, oh, she's got a slow metabolic rate. Of course she does, because she's not eating enough. So if we change that around a bit, we can speed things up a bit and it works well. We definitely have a risk of injury. And injury actually is there because if you're injured, does your training load go down? Yes, so it's the body actually putting in almost like a safety mechanism to make sure that you don't train anymore, okay? We definitely get anemia-related issues, so our iron levels go down, and then that increases our risk of getting infections. And we get things like gastrointestinal symptoms, bloating, wind, pains, cramps, stuff like that. And it's interesting because we also get athletes that cholesterol levels go up as well, which is what I would be looking at if I've got some bloods as well. And then we've got impaired sleep, fatigue, depression. Do you think they're good for performance? No, definitely not. And we can get all of those going on as well at certain times. So you can see here, the body's affected all of the way. And I suppose for me, I'm particularly interested in why it might affect the sexual reproductive hormones, and they're specifically estrogen and progesterone. And we'll talk about that now. So these hormones, they're basically our chemical messengers. They're telling the body what it should be doing. They have far-reaching effects throughout the body, from our head to our toes. And basically, they need fuel as well. And they drive all the beneficial adaptations to exercise as well. So they're completely linked in everything that we do, absolutely everything we do. They regulate all of our body functions. And guess what? When you don't eat enough, you can't produce some of them. So that would be particularly estrogen and progesterone, which is particularly important for bone health, which is really crucial for you at your age at the moment. And guess what? There are other hormones, probably the stress hormones, that goes up. And actually, what that does is that makes everything even worse again. So it's like a soup of things going on that needs a little bit of time to get them all regulated as well. So these two particular hormones, estrogen and progesterone, they change through the month. So at the beginning of the monthly cycle, you'll have much more estrogen floating about. And then as we come to about day 14 or 15, it starts to dip. And then we have an increase in the other hormone, which is progesterone. They play a really important part in bone health, heart health, and how we feel, so our mood as well, okay? So if we don't have them, do you think that's a performance benefit? No, it's not. And even missing as little as 3 periods in a row can actually have a serious, significant impact on our bone health. So we really can and should use menstrual health as a real tool for us to monitor how well we're fueling our training. It's brilliant. It's something that men doesn't have, and actually we can use it positively rather than seeing it as a negative. And I use it an awful lot to monitor some of our athletes as well. Now, this is something that you need to be aware of. Functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, that's a word, isn't it? And me being able to say that was something. So basically, if you haven't had a period by the age of 16, you should go and get that checked out. It's really very important, because at that point, all women of reproductive age should have a regular monthly cycle. Menstruation is a real barometer of how healthy you are. It's really important. And even if you have a period but it's very light, or it only lasts a day or two, you need to think about that as well, because, or if you miss a month, skip a month, etc., we'll talk about that in a little minute. But remember that, so for example, somebody like Gwen Jorgensen, who was a big triathlete, is now coming back after having a baby to see if she can win the marathon in Tokyo. And she used it as a training metric as well, using something like Training Peaks. I use it with a lot of our athletes, and we certainly, it has worked exceptionally well, because I'm able to focus their mind on their fueling by using this as our metric also. And this is the key bit. This is our bones, okay? So this is what we want our bones to look like. Think of a crunchy when you break it open, okay? And then think about a crunchy that you've sucked the middle out of. That's what I always say. And that's a bone that's starting to get very, very thin and potentially will lead to problems. Now, the thing about our bones are, we get to this point probably by the age of 19. That's it. It ain't getting any better than that. And that has to do us to, we're 90, okay? So we don't want to be getting to the age of 19 here. Where's it going to go from there? Because in bone health, once you reach the age of about 35 or 40, it is going in this direction if we don't do anything about it, okay? So it is important that we get those bones to be as thick and strong as possible. So therefore, it's very important that we fuel the exercise that we're doing, and that if we do have any difficulties, we raise the alarm as quickly as we possibly can. But what are some of the problems? People have PMS, there's issues around menstrual cycle, so we do have a change in body mass. We do get bloated, we do retain fluid. Be aware of it, be prepared for it, and accept that it will happen as well. So I had an athlete away at competition last week in humidity of plus 80, heat of 35, and couldn't understand why their shorts felt a bit tighter. It was nothing to do with gaining weight. It was all to do with probably the fact that their periods were due, and it was also in the heat as well. So be prepared for that also. One of the things that happens as well during the menstrual cycle is that there can be a change in body temperature. That's why people might sleep a wee bit differently throughout the latter parts. But a higher core temperature can persist. So good cooling strategies, ice drinks, ice lollies sometimes can work, especially if you're training hard in the heat in the second phase of your menstrual cycle as well. But being aware of it is really important as well. So do actually monitor your menstrual cycles for lots of different reasons also. And then we have PMS, which would be a range of different symptoms, from some athletes getting sick to some athletes eating all around them, as far as they're concerned. This kind of maybe need for chocolate or sweet things, as they perceive that to be an issue. And again, it may hamper performance in terms of what happens as well. It affects about 40% of the population, so the chances are it's going to affect quite a lot of athletes also. And again, the diagnosis is the symptoms that persist on at least 5 days prior to menstruation. And the interesting thing is, you know, people love chocolate potentially around this time, etc., etc. So these are kind of some of the things as well. This is an interesting from one of our athletes. We monitored her menstrual cycle. She had to take some time off a couple of years ago because her performance dipped. So we looked at that, and basically she would follow now. Once we got her eating habits up to fueling her performance, she follows what we call a 5-week cycle. And then what happens is when she comes up to major competitions, that might move out to a 6 or 7-week cycle because her training load increases, or she might have gone to altitude as well, which will increase your requirements. And then when she comes back down again, we can bring that back into a 5-week cycle as well. So things can change, but make sure you keep an eye on it as well, and that's what we do for her. From a performance point of view, we know that she performs better at a slightly lighter weight, but we manage this quite well, and then her weight has to go back up again. So you can't stay at the same weight if it's not a weight that's suitable for you in the first place. We need to make sure and be aware of that. We screened, and look what we're coming up with. When we look at checking, does your menstruation change when exercise increases? Yes, it does for a lot of people. So that's a question you should ask yourself. How many days were you absent from training or competition due to injuries? That can have an effect as well. And what we found is that 40% of our athletes across a range of different sports miss things like injury, sickness, menstruation stops, daily and weekly cramping, daily and weekly bloating. So if your participation is at a high level, doesn't matter what age group that you are, it's something that you need to consider as well. But this was the interesting bit. A lot of the ones that were at risk followed dietary habits that possibly were leading to this. So gluten-free was in there, no surprise. Dairy-free was in there. Paleo diet was in there, low carbohydrate diet was in there. When you follow some of these practices, it's very hard to make sure that you've got enough fuel in the tank to fuel what you're trying to do. So just be mindful about that as well. So if there's issues, you need to communicate it. Don't expect that people are going to know. These are the people I don't want you taking any information from. So the key thing is, remember, if somebody has no clothes on, don't listen to a word they're saying in terms of nutrition advice. That's a crucial point, okay? These are another couple, but these are the images that you're being bombarded with. You know, I'm not sure that this doll here could do very much in terms of what you're trying to do. I wouldn't say she could run a lot. So, you know, be mindful that this is not real life. It's not real life, and that's not what you're trying to achieve. This is an athlete who, she basically, the most valuable thing I've learned is that all the training in the world, but if your diet isn't matching your training load, you've already lost. She's experienced what too light means. She felt really, really bad. It's not nice crawling across a finish line. It takes scares sometimes, so what I don't want you to be is that person that got injured and has lost maybe 6 or 7 months of your career because of that and have to come back from that. And she gained a kilo of weight, and she actually got a PB in what she was trying to do. So this idea of weight sometimes is the wrong idea, so we need to make sure of that as well. And I suppose she finds it prepping a little bit, making sure she's thought ahead, planning, looking at that time. You know, so if you're training twice or 3 times in a very short space of time, be prepared for that as well, and you need to increase what you eat around that. Food is fuel, and diet is as important as her training. So, to finish off, really, food isn't the enemy, and neither is weight. We just need to use it in the right way. When you match your energy requirements, sometimes there will be a bump in your weight, but that's okay. Expect it and be prepared for it. Racing weight is important, but not to live at as well. If you're getting sick or injured all the time, you're just not that unlucky. So you need to revise and look at what's going wrong and ask some question. Listen, you're in a great position. We have our own personal body cues telling us that things aren't right. Males don't have that. We should use it and use it really well and use it in a real positive way and use it as part of your own personal monitoring tool, and that's really important. And sometimes it's what you can't see, and this brings me back to don't believe the hype that's out there. That's really, really important. So thank you very much.